Hello, welcome back to 1874. It's time for a very special show, even. It's a transfer talk show. I am joined, Dan Bardell, by European football expert Kevin Hatchard. Absolutely nobody better to talk about the big signing that Villa made yesterday. Donyell Malen arrived for around £20 million. Kev will have seen him play a number of times, I'm sure. So I thought I'd treat you all to having a chat with Kev about Villa's new forward. Kev, how are you? January's a busy month, isn't it? When you have Christmas, but in this industry, in our world, well, more your world as well, it gets very busy around this time of year with games, transfers, and just all sorts going on.
Yeah, I had a couple of days off over New Year, and then that seems like about 3 years ago
Yeah,
now. So there's lots going on, but that's good.
yeah,
Always good as a freelancer to be bouncing around doing lots of different things. So that's always good fun. And yeah, it's really interesting. I think teams are making some quite big moves. I think it's going to be maybe a busier January than it has been in recent years. And I think Villa, once again, making quite an interesting signing from the Bundesliga.
yeah. I worked with you last January. Unfortunately, we don't get to work together this January because I'm doing Tuesday, Friday, and I think you're doing Monday. So our
Kept us
paths,
apart.
yeah,
That's
paths won't cross this year, which is disappointing. But I said this the other day: we were in the trenches last January trying to come up with stuff to think about. But generally, everyone's passed PSR yesterday in the Premier League. It's feeling like a much busier January and a much more interesting January, isn't it?
Yeah, I think teams do have a bit more wriggle room. I think there's probably an acceptance that PSR isn't quite working in the way that they want it to work. I mean, I've said to you before, I'm all for trying to make it more competitive across the board, trying to be, a bit more careful about what clubs are spending because you don't want clubs to run away with these ideas of building their squads. But if you take a team like Villa, who have ambitious owners who want to grow in a sustainable way, then what you need is some kind of facility for them to do that. So you don't want to punish ambitious teams, but you also don't want to let state-backed teams like Manchester City or Newcastle completely dominate the league by being able to spend
No.
hundreds of millions or whatever they want. So I like the spirit of PSR. I just think the application is wrong at the moment. I mean, the way I would have it is have a league-wide cap on spending, and you'd set it quite high, and everybody can get there if they're ambitious enough. But you can't go beyond it. So
Yeah.
you can't have teams then with limitless resources blowing everyone out the water. But equally, a club like Villa, who are ambitious, have the facility to try and get up there and make signings. So, yeah, I think it needs reform, but I applaud the idea.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. It's the application that's laid down. It needs to find some form of middle ground. I think so that the teams that want to can try and get to where the big boys have been for so long. I actually realised yesterday doing the shows, Villa have been pretty successful in the last few Januaries. If you think back to Emery's first January in 2023, they brought in Alex Moreno and obviously John Duran, who's gone on to be a success. But Moreno really helped transform Villa, the way they attacked and the way they built up, and they ended up finishing seventh and qualifying for the Europa Conference League. Last January, it probably was a signing that was made with very little fanfare. But in fact, Morgan Rogers turned out to be a brilliant
Yeah,
signing, and you look where
yeah.
he is now compared to where he was when Villa signed him, and he's probably the first name on Unai Emery's team sheet for the way he wants to play. Just how successful do you think this January move will be? Donyell Malen, someone who I mentioned at the start, you will have commentated on a lot, watched a lot of. What are your thoughts around this signing?
So look, let's start with the good stuff, right?
Yes, please.
When he's yeah, when he's very good, and when he's on a hot streak, he's excellent. So he's quick, he's a direct runner, he takes people on, he can score off his right foot, which is his favoured foot, but off his left foot as well. Super finisher. Um, he's got really good instincts in front of goal. Scored a goal from close range the other day that really showed kind of he has that instinct for where the ball's going to drop sometimes. He can score goals from range as well. So when he's on it, very, very good, very tough to deal with as a defender. The other good thing is his versatility, because if you look, for example, when he was at PSV, he played as one of a two in attack
Yeah,
with Zahavi, and he was excellent. He was really, really good. Scoring goals, making goals, exceptional. You look at his time at Dortmund, they don't do that. They don't generally have a front two. So he's played off a central striker, whether it's Haaland or Girassi or Füllkrug, whoever it's been. He hasn't been that central striker. He's been in a wider role. He can play right wing, he can play left wing.
Yeah.
You look, for example, at what he did at the Bernabeu earlier this season. Scored the opening goal, made the second for Jamie Gittins with a great run down the right. And they were 2-0 up in that game, and they eventually lost 5-2. But that was a glimpse of what he's capable of. But then you start looking at the stuff that needs work. And I think one of the things is consistency, because he can go on these long streaks of scoring goals and looking really good, and then he'll disappear for a few games. And sometimes that will even happen in a game.
Yeah.
So, for example, the game at Wolfsburg recently, just before Christmas, he was ever so good in the first half, and then second half he just disappeared. I think that chimes with Dortmund in general, actually. If you look at Dortmund as a team, they're very inconsistent. And when they click, they're brilliant. Got all the way to the Champions League final last season, but there is that kind of, that you never quite know what you're going to get. And the other thing that I think Unai Emery will need to work on is his defensive contribution, which is inconsistent, let's say. He can be a little bit lackluster without the ball. So, and again, that chimes with Dortmund in general sometimes. So, look, he's a fixer-upper. He's somebody who has great talent, Rafa van der Vaart said he thought he had the tools to be the best player in the world at one stage when he was a young player at PSV. That might be a bit over the top, but it shows you how highly he's rated by people who, are in the know in Dutch football and know a player when they see one. So the key really is, can Emery get the best out of him?
Yeah, shivers down my spine hearing Rafa van der Vaart, someone who seemed to score every time he set on the pitch against Villa for Tottenham. I think he must have scored more goals against Villa than anyone else. I bet if I looked that up, that would be the case, as it is with so many players in English football. This sounds, Kev, very similar to a conversation you and I had 18 months ago on this channel around Moussa Diaby. I feel like you're saying quite a lot of the same things. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think Diaby's slightly different in the way that he operated and stuff. And do you know, it's funny you say that, because I went back and looked at Diaby's numbers. 6 goals and 8 assists in the Premier League.
Decent.
That's good.
Yeah.
It's good. And, let's be honest, the only reason he left the club was because they could get a big chunk of money for him from Saudi. Because I think otherwise they persevere with him. I think he probably becomes more consistent and probably has more of an impact. I'm a massive Diaby fan. And I looked back and thought, you know what, those numbers aren't bad for a first season. So he's another one that, scored goals, made goals, had that pace, had that trickery. And I know people look at it and think, is there a bit of Bundesliga tax here? Because it's a transitional league. You have a lot of counter-attacks. It can be wide open, and players with pace and who are direct runners, they can really thrive. But he also had some great games in the Champions League as well. So, the talent is absolutely there for Malen. It's just whether Emery can get it out of him on a regular basis. And, I look at some players. Morgan Rogers is one. I think he's come on leaps and bounds. You look at what Watkins has done since he started working with Emery. You look at what Tielemans is doing now.
Mm-hmm.
Again, he was another one that when he was good at Leicester. Let's not pretend he wasn't. Obviously he was. But I feel like he's taking a bit of a leap now as well. It's taken him a while to win him over, but I think he's getting there. So, look, Emery is a coach that improves players. And I think with Malen, the raw material is there.
Yeah, I think Villa have missed Diaby in a transitional sense. I think Rodgers is brilliant because he'll get the ball and he'll kind of bulldoze past people and take people on. I think what they've missed with Diaby is that direct running into space. If you can manipulate the football in the way you build up in transition, if you can create that space to run into, that's what they've missed with Diaby. Is that what we're going to see with Malen? Is that more his game than say Rodgers and bulldozing people?
Yeah, he uses his pace as a weapon. That's absolutely it. So racing into space, trying to push it past people and beat them in a foot race. That's absolutely what he's all about. He loves the shot. He absolutely loves the shot. So, and that's been a criticism in German media of him at times, that he can have tunnel vision sometimes and he'll go for the shot when actually there was a pass on. But again, that's something I feel that coaching can bring out of him, because, I mean, you look at his time at Dortmund, Edin Terzic did well, got them to a Champions League final, got them to within one win of winning the league. But is he an elite coach? Nuri Sahin's come in this season, very inexperienced, is really struggling. So has he had that elite coach to take him to the next level? And my argument would be that he hasn't.
No, I had a bit of a conversation with someone I know who works in German football. Let's call him Tim Julian for the sake of this conversation. People listening will know who I'm talking about. He's not sure on this signing, and I raised the point that Dortmund, they've kind of had assistant managers that have gone to managers. So when I talk about it not being stable, I'm not talking about that because there's people coming in who are already in the environment, but they have had a lot of managers in Malen's time there, haven't they? So and you say there's not been an elite coach. So I do think there's caveats when people kind of say he's hit and miss, because he hasn't had that manager how I imagine Emery will be with him.
Yeah, I think that's the most fascinating thing about the transfer, right? It's what Emery can do with him. And Emery will have been all over this transfer. We know how much involvement he has. And so I think he will have seen something in him, and that pace is hugely important.
Is he faster than Diaby, would you say? Or there's a bit about
par? There's a question. I mean, he feels similar in that regard. I mean, he's certainly mega quick. There's no doubt about it. And I think people will be excited by him. There's no doubt. And if you look at his time at PSV when he played in that too, he was excellent. Now, the Eredivisie, it's difficult to know sometimes because the quality of defending in the Eredivisie is not great. And so players can flourish. But my counterpoint to that, having an argument with myself,
we all do.
It's Cody Gakpo, actually, because you look at somebody like Cody Gakpo, who got buckets of goals and assists when he was at PSV, and people went, yeah, but can he do it when he gets to the Premier League? Yes, he can. So, you look at the skill set Malen has, there are things he can't do, but the things he does do are very, very good, and are things that a lot of players can't do. They don't have that acceleration. They don't have that ability to break games open. They don't have that ability in transition. So I can see him fitting at Villa with the style that they have. I'd like to see him played through the middle, actually.
I was going to ask you this. Yeah, that was going to be my next question.
The temptation would be to put him on the right. But actually, I'd quite like to see him through the middle. So, and he gives them that option. But if you look at his time at PSV, when he was at his most comfortable, it was in a 2 in attack, in a kind of 4-box-2, really. So I think that's where he's best, but he's versatile. And he can do real damage out wide as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm no European football expert like you, but I have seen Malen play, and I've got to admit, I thought he was left-footed, because he's adept with both feet.
Yeah.
He's so adept with both feet. Yeah. I honestly believed he was left-footed and was coming in to cover off Bailey, but he's right-footed.
Yeah. That's another thing. He is really two-footed. Like, he's got that ability off his left. Can finish off either foot. And again, that you're always looking for versatility, right? And he's absolutely that. Can play down the right, can play off the left, can play through the middle. So he's got all of that. I think it's just going to be So there's another thing here as well, which is, can he settle?
Yeah.
Because he didn't quite settle at Arsenal when he was there as a youngster. I
He's
think
had an
they had
interesting journey.
I think they had quite high hopes for him, but I think he got a bit impatient. I think his agents wanted to move him on. And so that didn't quite work out. But I think they genuinely saw him at Arsenal as somebody who could break into the first team and play on a regular basis. There was a feeling in Germany that he never quite settled in the way that they hoped. I think it's been widely known for over a year now he's been looking to leave, and it was just about whether Dortmund could get close to what they paid. I mean, they wanted more than they paid, really. So, yeah, I think there are intangibles there that we just don't know how they're going to pan out. You know, will he settle? Will he hit the ground running? Is he going to be a bit of a slow burner? We don't know. But if we're talking about raw talent, it's there.
I guess he's got someone he knows in the setup already in Martson.
Yeah.
As well, hasn't he? Which will help, a country mate as well.
Yeah, fellow Dutchman. They played together really well, actually. You know, they were both part of that squad that got to the Champions League final, even though Malen didn't start that game. So yeah, you know, a familiar face doesn't do any harm. And I think the positive thing about Villa is the culture.
Yeah.
So you look at what Emery's built. Yeah, it's an environment where they're really on the up. There's real competition for places. Now, again, how does he deal with that? Because he wasn't always he started a lot of games for Dortmund, but it's generally, as I recall, kind of low 20s in terms of starts. So, you know, like 22, 21, that kind of thing. So it's whether he can absolutely nail down a first team place. But of course, Villa are in Europe. There's lots of games, so you'll get those opportunities.
Yeah, I keep meaning to do it. I still haven't looked up the rules. I know he can play in the Champions League, but I've seen mixed things about whether he can play in the group stage or not, the remaining 2 games in the group stage, or whether we have to wait till the knockouts to be able to register him because he's already played for Dortmund.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I would think, and it may have changed with the new league phase, but my gut feeling is that he might have to wait until the knockouts. But I don't hold
need to get that confirmed.
Don't hold me to that. But that would make sense because that's the way they've always done it, is to have, once they stopped you being cup tied, it was always that once the group stage had finished, then you could play in the knockouts. But I'd have to double check.
Yeah, we don't want that being gospel. We don't want your European football expert tag to be taken off you because of you coming to talk to me.
Exactly.
That would be the last thing I want.
Cuffed and dragged away. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, David Stiles seems to think, and I think it was him the other day as well, says not in the group, just from the knockouts. So
that was my
due diligence.
My feeling off the top of my head that you couldn't play in the last 2. You'd have to wait until the knockouts.
Yeah, I just want to quickly circle back to where you think he might play and where you think his best position is, because Villa now, if everyone's fit, have got an array of options to play in the 3 behind either Duran or Watkins. I mean, having the 2 strikers is a nice problem to have in itself. But you think about the 3, the players that can now play off the striker in Rodgers, Jacob Ramsey, Tillemans plays there sometimes, John McGinn, Leon Bailey. Oh, I'm definitely missing people out. Did I say Ramsey? Anyway, Villa have got
I don't think you did, actually.
No, Ramsey. Yeah, Villa have got loads of players now that can play in that position, and it offers them a lot more variety. I think maybe I'm a bit guilty of this. I was thinking he has come in to be an alternative to Leon Bailey on the right-hand side and kind of hold the width down that side. But from what you're saying, his best position is that number 10 playing, well, second striker really, playing how Diaby played for Villa last season.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even say best position necessarily, because it'll depend on the opposition. It'll depend on what they want him to do. As you say, there will be games where they'll want him to play down the flank and cause problems down there. But could he play as the 9? Yes. Could he play as the guy, as a second striker in behind Watkins or Duran? Absolutely. So that's the real appeal of this, I think, is that he is a kind of, you know, his skill set isn't massively broad in the sense that he does lots of different things, but what he has is that searing pace, and you can use that in different ways. And he's got good technique. As I say, he can score off either foot. That ability to burst past people is really, really valuable, whether it's in a slightly deeper role or whether it's running in behind as a more, attacking player. If there was an injury crisis and Duran's out and Watkins is out, or you need to rotate, I think he could play up top, even though he's probably out of practice in that regard because he's played a lot of wide games for Dortmund. There's a lot to be positive about, but it's not a surefire hit. And I think it depends on the player because he's kind of got to make a decision here, really, deep down, because he's in his mid-20s now. He had all that potential. He's not been a bad player. He's been a good player at a high level. Now it's about whether he can get to that next level and be an elite player in the Premier League. And he has the physical gifts to do it. He just has to show that he's willing to do the work defensively and that he's willing to work on finding that consistency. I think that is the absolute key to this.
Yeah, I mean, Emery's managed to get John Duran doing most of the things that you'd want a centre forward to do off the ball in recent months in terms of closing down and running channels and, taking on complex instructions. So if he can do that, I'm pretty sure he'll be able to do it with Malen. I'm really excited about it. And on the face of it as well, Villa are replacing Philogene here in terms of squad space. And that is a move that just hasn't worked out. He just hasn't. Unfortunately, I think he's missed a step. He's gone straight from Hull to top four Champions League. Villa. He needed to be a middle step in there that he hasn't taken. So on the face of it as well, he's replacing someone who hasn't really offered much in the first half of the season, isn't he?
Yeah, and I think as well, it's. I think you said this on Twitter actually, or X as we're supposed to call it now.
Still Twitter, no?
Yeah, exactly. It'll always be Twitter to me. This is a sign of where Villa are at. That a move for somebody like Donyell Malen, a move for like Ian Martson, for example, earlier than that, feels perfectly reasonable. It doesn't feel completely out of whack. I mean, we said the same with Diaby because people forget that lots of clubs wanted Diaby. Lots of big clubs wanted Diaby. And I actually think in the end, it ended up being an accounting thing in moving on, as we said.
He was a little bit unhappy as well. He was in the first half of the season. He was brilliant and really important to what Villa did. And to be honest, Villa picked up the bulk of their points in that first half of the season, playing in that way, and he was a big part of that. But then he lost his way a little bit, and then he wasn't happy at losing his place, basically, and he never really discovered any form of consistency. He was a bit in and out. But like you said at the start, I can understand why they sold him. But if you look at Villa's points last season, most of them would have came with Diaby in the team, I would say.
Yeah, and, that was a coup when they signed him. That was a real, oh, wow, okay. And this, even though it's at a lower level financially, even though Malen wasn't as in demand, maybe, I still think it's a sign that Villa are on the right track. And I think it's a sign that they're an attractive club. Obviously a Champions League club right now. And I think it's a step in the right direction. I'm fascinated to see how it goes. I like him a lot as a player. He's a guy I really enjoy watching because, there's something quite old school about him in the sense that, he's just an absolute flying machine. Yeah. And he's the kind of guy that does get people off their seat. So I think a good start would help because he can get a little bit frustrated. He can get a little bit kind of down if it's not going his way. But again, that's something Emery, I'm sure, will work on him with.
Yeah, and he's going to be at the game tonight, I believe. Obviously, not registered in time to play, but he's going to be watching Villa and then will be available at the weekend against Arsenal. Final question from me, Kev, because I don't want to keep you for too long. Always love talking to you. Could speak to you all day, if I'm being perfectly honest. We saw, I don't know if you saw the Villa West Ham game on Friday in the cup or saw the goal. So I would say the second goal that Villa scored was a typical Emery goal with the slow build up. Suddenly it all accelerates, a few quick passes and someone swearing it for someone to knock it in the 6-yard box. Is Malen going to be the person putting the ball across, or is he going to be the person that is coming to the back post, for example, and knocking in the square ball?
Could be either.
Ooh, okay.
Could be either. Yeah, because he's got that ability to accelerate the play, which is what I think he's been brought in for. But also he does have good striker's instincts. If you look at his time at PSV, and again, people will go, it's only the Netherlands. But what I think stood out then was he scored all types of goals. So he could bang them in from range. I've seen him score some brilliant goals from the edge of the area. But he can also pop up at the back post and score really scruffy goals. I've seen him do that time and time again. So, or he could race down the right and cross to the far post just as he did at the Bernabeu for Jamie Gittins. So he's got that ability to contribute in lots of different ways. So, yeah, I'm just really fascinated to see how it works, because it could be that you've got a player that, say next season, once he's had a run at it, I mean, could be knocking in, 10 goals and 8 assists or something like that.
Yeah, that's
or
what we need.
Or it could be like, 4 and 2. You just don't know, which makes it all the more fascinating. But I think at that level of finance, it's absolutely worth the risk. Absolutely worth the risk, because he's young enough to make the jump. I think he probably knows that this is his big chance, because I think the Netherlands have waited for him to. I mean, he got a couple of goals against Romania, didn't he, at the Euros?
Yeah.
But I think the Netherlands are waiting for him to make that leap as well. There's a lot of competition for places across that forward line. So if he becomes a regular for Villa and really starts affecting their games in the Premier League and the Champions League, then I think, there's every chance that he'll get nailed down in that Netherlands team. So, yeah, it's exciting.
Well, Kev, thank you ever so much for talking to me this morning.
Pleasure.
I always text you. I give you no notice whatsoever, but I think you're pretty confident that you might get a sign someone who's played German.
Yeah, I did think there might be
played in Europe.
I did.
You're relatively confident you'll get the call. But no,
pleasure as always.
So much. Thank you, mate. Thank you so much. And I'm sure, and I can see from the chat that everyone's really enjoyed it, and the people that are going to go on to listen and watch as well will take a lot away from that. So thank you ever so much for coming on. Thank you to those that joined us live. Sorry I didn't get you too involved in the show, but I was too busy listening to what Kev had to say, to be perfectly honest. Do all the things I bang on about every single week, whether you're watching via video or audio. And thank you to Luke Roper for sponsoring the show. Use the code TVV20 and you'll get 20% off everything that Luke have to offer. Game tonight, obviously, Villa playing Everton. Be back tomorrow with a look back on that, and then of course a preview of the Arsenal game on Friday. So keep your eyes on the channel to know what's coming next. Have an excellent Wednesday. Is it Wednesday day? Yes. Have an excellent Wednesday and safe travels to those going to Goodison. Only one thing left to say: up the Villa.